Oh boy, that sounds like a heartbeat. Woo! Welcome to ZLORD Podcast.
It's a little bit
There's Carter.
humid today.
And I am teZa. And today we're going to talk about something that we really have to remind ourselves about ourselves all the time. So we'll share with you what we think about how we think is what we are.
Yes, I remember when I was a little, years ago when the whole hippie thing first began, it was you are what you eat. And that's still true to a degree. We are what we eat to one degree, but we really are what we think.
Well, we think about what
anything
we're
else.
eating, right? We make the decision whether we're going to have a greasy plate of burgers or a nice vegetable. That's
right.
how we think.
That's right, but more than what we eat.
Yeah, but see, it's interesting how it came into the culture. Instead of zapping them with, what you are is what you think, we weren't ready for that yet as a family of blended humans. We were ready for, the eating thing. Yeah, I can understand that, the eating thing. I think that's cool, that that's how it snuck into our consciousness, the collective unconsciousness.
I guess, and then I'm reminded of your mother who ate everything wrong you could eat and lived a long, healthy life. I mean, a long, healthy life.
Wait
and
a
she
minute,
ate,
yeah, but she ate a lot of fish and
She ate a lot of
vegetables,
fish.
but she also ate a lot of cakes and cookies and M&Ms.
and go to the McDonald's and having the McDonald's burger and eating, She
Yeah.
ate a lot of stuff that was, and always the cheapest chicken. She'd buy
Yeah.
the cheapest chicken you could buy. No yard birds for her.
Nope.
But she was a farm girl, and she really knew a lot about the natural world. So she was a very natural person. But it was interesting that in this whole discussion about you are what you eat, to some degree, our bodies are able to process a lot of stuff because there's a lot of people that come up with zero understanding of that. And in our culture these days, it's manifested in 50% obesity. But 100 years ago, there wasn't that obesity. Of course, everybody was working physically a lot harder than we are now. So,
Right.
so definitely, we're the sugar and the fat and the processed foods and the what do they call that stuff?
Carbohydrates.
The sugar stuff.
Yeah, all the processed foods. So
That-
refined flours, sugars. Well, okay, I lived in the Caribbean. I lived in the West Indies, third world, for many years. And I really noticed, this is before the internet, before CNN, people were pretty isolated in those days. And I'd take note that living very primitively, and poverty level, but everybody was happy because they were farmers and they could go out and tend their bananas and their beans, and everybody was slim except the shopkeepers. And that's when I noticed a big difference in society's roles that we take. Certain people, if they had a sedentary life, they became plump.
Yeah.
And if people had to go out and walk hills and go for miles to feed their goats and tend their chickens, and the more activity they did, they stayed slender, even though they ate quite well.
Even though they eat a lot of starches and potatoes and stuff.
Yams, sweet potatoes, and the shopkeepers
A lot
were
of it has
always
to do
plump.
with physical activity.
Now they were plump not just because of having crackers and cookies on their shelves and easy to reach and sodas, but because they didn't have to leave their little shop to go tend their garden.
There wasn't so much processed food in those days. Nowadays, we've really got it. Like if you go to the grocery store, they say that all the good food is around the walls and all the crappy stuff is in the middle. Of course, the middle stuff is the stuff that tastes good, like the cookies and the crackers and the potato chips and all that stuff and all the packaged stuff, which we have in this country. And in other countries, not so much, like in Greece and Europe and Italy and Latin America.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, even though there are plantains and yuccas and stuff like that, which aren't necessarily so perfect, as long as you're
They're pure.
They're pure.
Food.
It's real food.
They're pure food. So we're getting kind of a little bit off topic.
Discussion.
But it's interesting because as we eat, yes, that is what we decide.
It's part of it.
Nobody's putting food into our mouth unless we're a little baby. Each bite we take is a decision saying, oh, this is good for me. And like I hear often our daughter says, I'm not going to waste my calories on that. Like a donut where she is trying to get slim, and she's doing a great job because she's changed her thinking.
That's right.
Yeah, so this is what it's really about. It's about the mind.
At the end of the day, it's about the thinking, what you dwell on.
What you dwell on in your mind is how your life is. And so, lately there's been a feeling of the divide. Instead of being healed, which Carter and I always thought we could add to by having this podcast. It's one of the major reasons why we talked publicly, is to helping to heal the divide. But it seems in many ways that a lot of people have become professional whiners. The people who are not content with change and so upset with what's going on that they dwell on it like a religion. And you and I, Carter, have always had at the very most foremost of our lives is God, spirit, consciousness.
Right.
And even before
trying to be
even before our love, our commitment as we two are one type of married people. And I've noticed that a lot of the people who are very discontent, the ones who are out there protesting and are very adamant that this is just all wrong, that whatever change is happening is all wrong, and not just because it's wrong in itself, but because it's changed. They want it to be back where it was. And life is always just about change. I mean, really, the only thing that's constant in life is if I have a relationship with higher power, God, spirit, consciousness, whatever somebody calls it.
God's the only thing that never changes, but our perception of God changes. We change as we understand. We get better at it, but that God never changes. But that's the only thing that doesn't change. That's interesting.
Right.
It's not like everything always changes. God doesn't, but everything else does.
And I'm writing a book right now, the book that I've written years and years ago, and I'm in a section now where I'm in prison, and I'm thinking, where are you, God? I mean, have you forgotten me? There is no God. I mean, I'm actually saying those words, whereas today it's like, oh, it hurts to even hear it. Yeah. But I actually felt it, and I read it, and a lot of people who have not developed that relationship with God, higher power, consciousness, the one, whatever, however it is most easily called in your heart, those people are having a really hard time.
Well, most every human being goes through that at some point. And if you get old and you're there, that's harder. But all the young people have to go through that and find their relationship.
We had to develop our relationship.
That's the path of life. That's what we come here for.
Yeah, I didn't just take, and I know you didn't either, on a platter what our parents handed us. Mm-mm. You had to go out and discover for yourself what your truth was. I call it truth. God is also truth. God is love. And I certainly did too. And here we are today as adults in our golden years, so to speak. And I feel very comfortable with the change that is happening in this world because I don't know where we're going, but I know that change was needed and that a lot of systems were falling in not a good place. And so change is tough. And I'm not a political person, so this is not going to be a political discussion. It's a spiritual discussion. But I'm not upset. Like other wait, let me just finish one thing. Because what I'm getting to is I feel a little ostracized from my peers that for many, many decades, we've shared many things, but now people have decided, a lot of people, a lot of friends I've had many things in common with, like art or, sports or nature or sailing or adventuring. But now a lot of people are really, really angry, and they've become so ensconced with their anger that that's the only place that they have room for.
Yeah, and if you're not on their page, then you become a part of the problem. If you're not agreeing and going to the and being angry along with them, then they're pissed off at you because you're not taking the stance that they want, and we're having lack of freedom of speech and lack of freedom of embrace of everybody having their own essence, And I'm reminded by, we talk about this isn't really political, but in some ways it is, because one of our good friends, we've talked about him before, was very high up in one of the administrative political worlds.
Obama's.
Yeah, well, he was. And so he was one of the top 20 people. He was in the cabinet, actually. But his attitude has always been, I never found negativism to be very useful, and I never found, and so when this political situation changes, as it does from time to time, and I've known this guy 65 years, no matter who gets in, his attitude is always, well, this is the vote.
Yep.
This is who won. Let's try to get together and accept what the mandate is, and let's see what good we can make out of this within our own ability to understand and to be cooperative and to be helpful to make the world better. And he's always been that way, and he never gets judgmental and finger pointing about other people, and he's always open to what is, and that's in his mind. And that is the way he lives, is the way he thinks, and that's why he's such a giant person, because he's open to the positive and looking for the positive and accepting certain things that you can't do anything about and not wallowing in how shitty everything is. So
if somebody's listening to this and they're saying, well, that's all very well and good for that guy, but I'm pissed off. And I'm not happy with what's going on. I would like to introduce this topic of, as we think we are, which in today's parlance, in the more scientific parlance, it's called neuroplasticity. And a lot of people are talking about different doctors, really neurosurgeons, who are becoming public because things that have happened to them in their own personal lives. And I can give my own favorite example, which is Dr. Jim Doty, who unfortunately just passed away too early in life. But he wrote the book called Into the Magic Shop. And I read it years ago, and it's a remarkable story of how he started off with no guidance. His parents were into addiction and poverty, and he was just headed for a really bad life. And some woman named Ruth, whose son owned a magic shop, happened to be taking care of her son's shop, and in walked little Jim Doty at the age of 12. And she taught him techniques which are today called, like changing your mind and neuroplasticity and rerouting those pathways and all sorts of other technical terms, which really has to do with meditation and quieting the arguments that go on in the human brain and going into the negative pathways because they're comfortable and they're familiar. And this little boy, Jim Doty, was taught how to still that busy mind and get into techniques. I don't think she called it meditation. She just called it magic. She just said, you want to learn some magic? And he, at the age of 12, set goals, things like that were totally unachievable at that age, which was, in his circumstances, to be rich, to be famous, to do good for the world, not necessarily in that order, and to be happy. And he achieved them all. and more so, and set up, really worldwide compassion and altruistic means of spreading this message through universities.
He even changed. Once he got to be real rich and real famous, then he realized that was not a very good end game, and that he needed to go on beyond that. Rich had nothing to do with anything any real. So he was able to regroup and refocus and go forward and not dwell on stuff that was holding him back.
Right.
So he was always able to change somehow he was able to not dwell on the negative stuff. Like me, for instance, like I've got a problem with this one person that's a friend of mine, and he's acted real badly, and so I'm having a problem with it, and so I've got to not dwell on this, and it's like it's a challenge, and I'm aware of it, and it's a classic trap that I could just wallow around in here and be pissed off, and I just gotta not do it.
Okay, so here's the remedy. I've talked about this before, and I'm not trying to chastise you, Carter. I'm just trying to be your helpmate. When I got wronged by especially a personal friend, not necessarily the government or, the neighbor's dog or anything, a really close friend that I had let into my heart, and it got stabbed with pain like you're going through, I learned from the 12-step program to pray for the object of my pain, to pray. And it is so hard. It is so hard when you first start doing this that you feel like you're grimacing and you're saying, all right, I'm supposed to do this, so I'm praying for that person. And it doesn't feel like it's sincere, but you start by doing it, by changing that resentment into blessings. And the first time I had to do it, it was a girlfriend who had wronged me, and it took me years. She's now passed away. That was Monica, remember, Carter?
Yeah.
And so I prayed for her every day, sometimes several times a day. And son of a gun, the day that I realized, the pain is not in my heart anymore. I'm not feeling like this awful knot in my stomach every time I think of her. It had dissolved with me consistently sending her blessings. Not that she knew about, she was not in my life. That very next day, she called me and asked for spiritual guidance because she was in crisis. Her husband was divorcing her, et cetera, et cetera. And it was the first time I saw the universe really at work with cause and effect. You put something out and something comes back. And so I changed my anger, my hurt, my wanting bad things to happen to her into sending her blessings. And I healed, my heart healed. And then she needed my help. And together, you and I helped her. And so, I've had to do that on several other occasions, and it does take effort.
She never helped anybody.
Not even her kids.
Own selfishness,
not even her
kids.
kids.
Cut everybody else. It was all just selfish stuff, and she ended up dying.
Yeah, terrible, terrible brain cancer. So I would recommend, Carter, and anybody else who's listening who has some kind of resentments, whether it's for a person or for a government, just start sending blessings, because what you're doing is shifting those pathways. Now, if you listen to the neurosurgeons like Dr. Surya Gupta was talking on the Mel Robbins podcast recently, he's able to actually discuss, and Dr. Doty does too, in his next book he wrote before he died called Brain Magic, Mind Magic. You can actually trace the pathways being shifted when they put electrodes up to somebody's brain and are studying people who shift from a negative barrage of thoughts, which happens to us all because we're human, and they consciously shift and go into a positive realm. It brings new energy, new pathways, and it actually thickens up certain parts of the brain. I don't know which they are called right now, but they're the parts that allow us to tap into contentment and serenity and not being totally in angst all the time. And so this is a science of neuroscience going on right now that has to do with how we can retrain our brain. And so what you're talking
so
about
they're
is...
finding that actually it's measurable by machines.
It's measurable, absolutely.
Because normally you would say,
Yeah.
well, you learn about that in the Bible study, and like the mind is the builder. That comes from certain spiritual things,
spiritual
where
thinking.
as you think, so you become, and that's true. There's no question that's true. That if you think and you dwell on crap, you're gonna it's gonna be bad. But if you dwell on the good, then you become happy in life. But it's one thing to feel happiness and to be better in your daily life, and to not be angry and hating people or disliking people. Is something else to be able to measure it with a machine. So you're saying they're measuring this now with like electrodes or something. I'm
saying that science is now catching up with spirituality, and it has been for quite a while. Okay, so
that's interesting.
As I recall how I got out of addiction and how I got into a spiritual life, I always go back to my very first experience of when I got into meditation. And I was severely suffering from a terrible pain. And in today's world, they would call it a psychosomatic pain. I went to the hospital because I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't stand up straight. The pain was emanating from my belly button, and it would travel around my belly button. And
well, your parents had disowned you, right?
Yes, my parents had decided I was
a
horrible daughter, and they disowned me.
It's like getting punched in the gut, and so then you couldn't stand over. You couldn't stomach it. You couldn't stomach it.
But my brain did not know that. My brain was not saying, "Oh, this is
you're just a kid."
This is because my parents said, "Don't ever call home, or you're no longer our daughter." For they had their reasons, but they were not valid in my world. And so
you're like 19 or 20 or something, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So I was absolutely incapacitated. There was no physical, structural reason for the pain. And this happens a lot in today's world, according to Dr. Surya Gupta. He's seen many, many, many people come to him suffering from terrible pain, and they could not find anything. So what they did for me is what good doctors are doing these days is, well, we have to first do all the tests, and then my doctor, back when I was 20, scheduled me for exploratory surgery. They were going to cut me open to see if there was an alien in there.
Jesus.
But before the surgery happened, and I was so desperate, I would have done anything. I would have said, "Hey, take out everything." I was desperate. And, 20-year-old not being able to function, not being able to stand up. So my friend at the time had just become a meditator. TM, Transcendental Meditation, had just come to the States. It was like 67, 68. And everybody was talking about Maharishi and the Beatles and Mia Farrow, and all sorts of celebrities were raving about it and going to India and writing songs. And so my friend had gotten initiated, and he really, really enjoyed that new uplifting way of thinking and being. So he said to me, "Why don't you try it?" And I said, "I'll try anything." So I was given what's called initiation. It's like a little ceremony, and you're given the technique right there, and you're given the experience right there, which is a training of how to redirect your mind so it is not dwelling on anything, whether you're aware of it or not, but it goes toward a sacred sound called a mantra. And so at the very instant that I was given this gift, boom, a big, huge white light appeared in my consciousness, and I was swept away by this experience of being at one with the universe, and the pain never, ever came back again.
That's amazing.
So soon after this, yes, it is amazing. It changed my life. As soon after, I didn't have to drag myself anymore. I walked to the hospital guys and said, "Well, I'm canceling the surgery, and I just thought I'd tell you that I'm cured." And so this was like I said, 67 or 68. I'm not really certain. If,
This is
I think it's 68.
General or someplace like
It
that.
was, no, Mount Auburn.
Mount Auburn
in
Hospital
Cambridge, Mass. I was living in
Massachusetts.
Cambridge, Mass. It was Harvard Yard. I was working at Harvard. So the doctor that was with me called in a lot of his colleagues and said, listen to her story. And I told my story. And they all went, we are just beginning to realize how the mind affects the body. How the mind is really the root cause of so much of what happens to us physical beings. And now this whole science of neuroplasticity, of rerouting pathways that used to be dwelling on nothing but negativity, and we have the choice of creating new pathways into forgiveness and acceptance and compassion and altruistic thinking is really the modern way of being a human that many of us are grateful for, because it's a hell of a lot comfortable for me at least to think about something pleasant and constructive and positive rather than the crap that's happening.
Yeah, so if you're angry and you're mad and you don't like the political situation and you're pissed off and you're wallowing around being angry about it, stop doing it, because it's killing you. And it's not helping anybody. It's not helping you or anybody else. It's just making everything worse. Find some good somewhere in something that's good, that's bigger than the bullshit that's coming across the newspaper and the TV and the radio waves and the self-righteous anger and the people that have got all the answers. Just find some way to think of something that's bigger and better and more fun and interesting. Even a flower or a tree or a leaf or the wind
or a cloud,
or the universe,
a beautiful
or
cloud in the
something
sky,
bigger than us and our little stuff, and change your mind and get out of that, because what you dwell on and what I dwell on is who I am and who I become and who you become, and it's killing you. If you're feeling crappy and hating everybody and hating half of the people that don't agree with your politics, you're killing yourself, and you're part of the problem, and so am I. I'm not pointing my finger at you. I'm talking to myself.
With your friend, I mean, let's make it personal. With your friend's situation, like I said earlier, I really wanted to not feel resentment and hurt about my situation. So I committed myself to every time this thought came into my mind, like, oh, that bitch, how could she do that? And then I would say, oh, wait, okay. I can choose.
We were talking yesterday about
love. And I would send them, even though it hurt like hell to do that, it didn't feel normal because I was developing new pathways in my brain. So are you going to try it, Carter?
Well, I remember yesterday you asked me, you said, well, you're going to have to pray for this guy. And I said, there's no way I'm not praying.
Well, because we found out he has cancer. We found out.
I'm not praying.
I said we're going to have to start. Wait. I said, Carter, as much as we don't want to, we have to pray for this guy. And you said,
I'm not praying.
I said you're going to go to hell.
I can stamp it out of my mind, and I can change my mind and think about higher things and better things, but I'm not praying about this guy.
Well,
but I think I'm wrong about that.
There's the challenge in life.
I'm going to have to do it.
You're dead wrong. You're dead wrong.
I'm just wrong about it.
I'm telling you, from somebody who loves you, I'm not saying I'm better than you. I'm just saying that you will suffer.
That's going to not be.
You will suffer.
It's definitely not something I'm wanting to be doing. I can tell you that, because it has not been. This has not been a good situation.
Well, we don't want to turn this into a therapy session.
Anyway.
But, everybody who's listening can relate. Everybody experiences hurt or anger or resentment, whether it's for a political party or a best friend. And even in our family, I've had to pray for a family member who really, really wronged us, both of us. And I pray for this family member, and basically I have nothing to do with this family member because there was no way to resolve it. There was mental illness. There was no way it could be healed. And sometimes you just have to walk away when there's mental illness involved. But when there is a possibility of reconciliation in one's own heart, it doesn't mean you have to be buddy-buddy with the person who wronged you. You can distance yourself, you can separate yourself. But to carry that resentment will kill.
That's the thing that's not good.
Your love, your hope.
And dwelling on, and what you dwell on, what I dwell on is going to be who I become. And so I've got to dwell on great thing. I can stamp this thing out and ignore it and put other things in its place, and that's what I've been doing. But it comes back, and it's not good, so I'm going to have to address it more head on, I guess.
Even if it takes years. The deeper the hurt is, the longer it will take to repair. The Native Americans have this saying, I don't know where I heard it, because I'm very involved with the Native American traditions and their customs and their thinking. I've always been that way since I was a child. They say that if two lovers separate, for each time that the lovers penetrated each other's aura, which obviously means lovemaking, intercourse, it takes a year to heal the break in that person's psyche, or their soul, their heart. And just imagine if you're with somebody for a long time and you've had lovemaking, you're going to have a lot of healing. It's not just going to be walking away and say, okay, I'm done with them. It takes time to heal these deep psychic wounds that we have. And we're emotional beings, but we're also spiritual beings, and people forget that. That's the predominant thing in our lives. We, you and I, Carter, are spiritual beings having an experience in our human bodies.
And there's no question that as we think, that's what we become. So that's a fact. And that doesn't necessarily make it easier to think right. But for sure, the first thing is that whatever it is we're thinking about, that's what we're going to become. And the mind is the thing that builds us. And that's just the way it is. And it's interesting to know that they can actually catch it on the electrodes in there now.
Yeah.
It's not just a
right.
God and a universe thing.
I actually know somebody, you do too, Jack O'Keefe, when she was living here in St. Augustine. She's a spiritual teacher out there in the world. And I called her up one day. I said, hey, do you need a visit? Because she was having an injury. And she said, oh, no, they got me all hooked up to electrodes. They're measuring my brain waves. As she meditates, because she's a teacher. So, of course, the scientific people went for people who are well-known and experienced meditators first. But there's many of us who are quietly dealing with life and trying to feel comfortable by learning to meditate, whether it's 1 minute a day or an hour a day, it doesn't matter. Or you can consciously shift your thoughts as they arise, and just, it's like a mini check. Like you feel uncomfortable, some thought comes up into your mind, and you can say, oh, I have the choice to rethink something. And I use a mantra. I mean, somebody else could say, oh, mantras don't work for me. I'll just not think. Well, good luck with that. I mean, the brain wants to think. So the reason that I love working with a mantra is, as my meditation teacher taught me, the mind is like a monkey. And when you have a mantra practice, a constant repeating of a sacred mantra, you're feeding a banana to the monkey. And the monkey is very happy because it's munching away on its sweet little banana, which is this sacred mantra that you feed it, instead of this cross currents of thoughts that just barrage everybody.
Yeah, and one of the things is that when you're feeling good, these thoughts will come in on us. And Eckhart Tolle, I learned a good technique from him is, because one way of doing is to try to say, oh no, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about that, and I'm going to get away from me, and I'm going to get that out of my mind. And you can kind of slowly but surely stamp it away, but it kind of creeps around and stays there, and waiting for an opportunity of quiet or weakness or something, and then it'll jump on you again. But Eckhart Tolle's way was that when you or having, and when all of a sudden one of these thoughts of something that happened to you 10 years ago or whatever comes in on you that makes you mad, instead of trying to run away and hide and get it out of your mind, you turn right and look right dead at it and say, oh, there you are.
again.
There you are again here coming in here to bug me. And for sure, that really works, because this thought will then shrink down and kind of embarrassment and it'll shrink down. You give it attention and look right at it and say, I don't want you here. I'm not going to have this in my mind. Then it will go away.
But wait, you're just saying that your situation is not like that, though. You're having some kind of an obsessive, compulsive repeat of the resentment.
It's the same thing because I'm having a nice day, and then the remembrance of these events that went down will come in, and instead of having a nice, happy, wonderful time, now I'm thinking about this again, and I'm thinking, now that SOB, he's a cheat and a liar, and he is. But that's not supposed to dwell on that.
I think the way I interpret Eckart's teaching is there's different steps to consciousness. I think that to be aware of what is bugging you is necessary, and that's what he's talking about. He's talking about confronting, looking straight at the object or the person or the issue of what bothers your consciousness. That's step one. And then there's the next step of how to dissolve it. Because once you have identified it, you don't want it to just be butting you in the head all the time. And the dissolving part is what we're talking about today. We're developing new pathways in our brain to accept that there are some bad things that happen in life. There are some bad people in life. There are some evil events. I mean, this is the shadow that Jung talks about. And so by step one, acknowledging that something is bugging you over and over and over, instead of just letting your brain go crazy and neurotic, we look at what's bugging us and then we say, I'm ready to release it. And by releasing it, we go around it, not through it, but we go around it and develop new pathways of consciousness by either praying for that object or blessing it or accepting it, whatever the words work best, so that the negative energy is changed to a positive one. Like words like compassion, being altruistic, accepting, rather than being in that negative state that causes anxiety and it disrupts the system. You feel like you want to be at war. You want to go out there and punch the guy.
But you can also dwell on other things, on more high-minded things too.
Right, but the high-minded things are up to you. That's your choice. You don't have to use a sacred mantra. You could use the pretty little flowers I've got growing in my backyard. The sweet perfume of my wife's scent. Whatever. There's a million things that we can substitute, but that takes work. It takes conscious work and effort to make those new pathways. And it's like learning a language, okay? I'm always trying to study Spanish. Carter is much more proficient with Spanish, so he doesn't worry about it. He just speaks it. And me, I'm always trying to, be able to speak it. I have not yet become comfortable. And when I get into a place where I'm using this new skill of using a new language, I can actually feel like my brain is, it hurts. It's almost like using a muscle that it's not a physical pain. It's like, oh God, this is not easy. This is uncomfortable. This is using my brain in a different way than I'm used to. But I want to speak Spanish, so I keep doing it. And I keep experiencing that new pathway. And I'm sure if I keep at it, one of these days, it's going to be not hard. It's going to be easy to shift into that new way. I bet you that language studies is very similar to changing the way we think. Don't you think, Carter? You've experienced what it was like to learn Spanish. You've often shared with me how it's difficult. You're getting tired, I can tell. Carter's ready to go on to the next activity. Okay, folks.
See you next time.
Okay. And if anybody has not told you today, I want to say that I love you and blessings to you from us.
All right,
and
Tez.
Here we go. Carter's going to give us a little
right.
musical interlude, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Om Namah Shivaya. That's my sacred mantra.